long overdue video. I was supposed to check this out a long time ago. The first one we're going to be checking out is the introduction, and then we're going to go into part 1 and 2, and then 3. I accept everything. I don't care if it was wrong, messed up. I don't give a damn. Hamon Beat! Let's get it. Hamon Beat.
A common topic among JoJo fans that I've become increasingly tired of is the idea of Araki forgot. People parrot this shit endlessly, and even though many people do it as a joke, there is a huge portion of people that actually believe it and see Araki as a bad writer. I find that a vast majority of the discussion on this topic massively downplays Araki's talent as what I believe to be one of the most accomplished mangaka of all time. And at this point, I think is having a real effect on his reputation among Western JoJo fans. The most frustrating thing about this is that 99% of the things people bring up are either not plot holes in the slightest, or things that are explicitly explained and just outright ignored by people.
Like Mrs. Robinson?
I think it's about time somebody debunks most of these so-called plot holes.
It is what it is.
So that's what I plan to do. I'll be going through the manga and finding almost every time when people claimed Araki forgot something.
Now I have to say this before we go into the part 1 and 2. People talk. Cool. I have my thoughts and opinions on what I like and how I like it, and I don't care if people talk. They can talk. I'm just curious how they go about this, because I don't care what the hell he forgot or what he mistakenly forgot. I don't listen to critics when it comes to a movie. I gotta be the judge of that myself. I'll be the one deciding whether or not something's good or not. But let's listen to what these people are saying about part 1 and part 2 of what he forgot to do. It's just me doing my little ranty rant. It's not important. It's just I don't give two shits what other people thinking about JoJo, because I love to joke. I don't know if this is going to change my mind about anything either. I doubt it. Part 1 and 2.
The first part of my new series where I will be debunking Araki forgot. I have collected a large number of these from people online, and some seem so absurd to me that I'll be showing them on screen, just so you know I'm not making these up. I wanted to go part by part for this series.
This is going to be interesting. Look at that doggy! Look at Jojo! I've never seen the manga of those.
But they are really about things introduced in later parts, so I'll be focusing on the first 2 parts in this video. In part 1, Will Zopelli demonstrates Hamon by punching a frog, leaving the frog unharmed and destroying the rock underneath. Many people point out that this is seemingly contradicted by Caesar in part 2, who says that Hamon has no effect on stone. However, this is not the case. This is a wonky translation in the common anime subs. In the manga translation, you can see that Caesar is specifically talking about the Pillar Men themselves. Hamon will be unable to kill them as long as they are stone. In part 1, Will was using the frog as a conduit to transfer the force of his punch to break the rock. While Caesar could definitely break the stone, it would have little effect. This is supported by the fate of Santana, who is still alive despite being broken apart in his stone form. Caesar himself also witnessed that the Pillar Men will absorb whoever touches them while they're made out of rock. Another property of Hamon people seem to think Araki forgot is the healing. In part 1, Will meets a man who uses Hamon to heal people. He also uses Hamon to heal Jonathan's broken arm. For some reason, people keep saying this is forgotten, when really it has no other opportunities to be used. Do people think that they could have healed Caesar or Loggins? Do people think Hamon can just bring people back from the dead? I fail to see the logic in bringing this up. In part 1, Dyer manages to spit a Hamon-infused rose at Dio while he has just a severed head. Some people ask how he is able to use Hamon, which is based on breathing, while he has no lungs. This is a misconception, as you do not need to be breathing at all times to have Hamon stored in your body. For example, Jonathan was still able to use Hamon underwater after getting a quick breath of air. Hamon is created by blood flow, and blood still flows in your body even when you're not breathing. Dyer had his body frozen, which halted his blood flow. His head was still not frozen, so he was able to use the small amount of Hamon he had left to infuse the rose. An extremely minor moment in part 1 is when Speedwagon uses his body heat to try and help Zopelli's frostbite. For whatever reason, people think this is a supernatural ability, despite him explaining that he learned it while traveling the world. One of the strangest things I've seen is a group of people who say Araki forgot about George Joestar's ring. George looked at it as he was dying, which makes the police officer bring up the story of George letting Dario go free. Over 100 people apparently think this was meant to come back in some way after George gives Jonathan the ring. The ring is really just there for Jonathan to remember his father by when he looks at it during the fight with Dio, but apparently that isn't good enough. George actually only tells Jonathan to take it in the anime, so maybe people just assumed a larger emphasis was being placed on it from there. I really don't get why some people are so particular about this small detail.
Yeah, it's very small detail.
Whenever there's a minor character
Poco
who
Loco
appears for a short time. In part 1, the example would be the young boy character, Poco. Poco was an extremely minor character who is really only relevant for one fight. He has a completed arc where he starts as a coward and eventually becomes brave and helps Jonathan. After this, his sister is rescued. I really have no idea why people would want him to come back, since he really has nothing left to do. After his defeat, Santana entered a rock-like state to save himself. The Speedwagon Foundation kept him underneath lights so that he would be unable to escape. A lot of people seem to think this is a plot hole, and it would imply Santana would return later.
No.
Really, he's written off in somewhat of a joke panel, so I really don't see how people expected this. At the end of the day, Santana is such a non-threat to Joseph that he probably just dispatched him off screen. A small one that I've seen brought up a surprising amount of times is asking what happened to Joseph's clackers. This is a prime example of people literally just not paying attention in the slightest, since the clackers were broken by Wired Beck.
I didn't even think about them afterwards. This stuff is now just bringing up, because I'm reading right now, Steel Ball Run. So now I'm getting like all the refreshing memories of the beginning in part 7. I love it. Poco Loco is not Pogo Loco, it's just Poco. Let's just pretend that's Poco Loco. Let's just do that. Like I said, you guys helped me a lot. I'm learning so much more. Every time I watch JoJo, I learn more. It's a beautiful thing. It's like you can never know enough about JoJo. Oh, God. Okay, I'm standing right now. Let me stop.
Finally, an idea that a lot of people seem to bring up is that Araki forgot about cars. I really don't understand why people would think this, since it was made very clear that Cars went insane and stopped thinking during his time in space. And that was everything I could find for parts 1 and 2.
That's interesting. I think those are little nonsense things to think about, but hey. Personally, I feel like those things were not even necessary. I didn't think that deep about them. It's funny. You overanalyze and think, but you don't think that damn hard when it comes to this. I don't know. Maybe it's like one of those things where, you know what? I don't care how it goes. That's just how it went.
She's up there! Hamon Beat!
But this is interesting because I've never seen the mangas of those, so those were kind of interesting to look at.
So in this video, I'll be
It's totally different.
Everything people claim Araki.
It's like a whole new anime.
The first one is also the biggest, Dio's coffin, but it is also one of the easiest to disprove. In part 1, Erina and the infant Lisa Lisa used the coffin to escape from the exploding ship. In part 3, Dio is found underwater 100 years later in the coffin. I have seen a massive amount of people who think that there must have been a second coffin and that its existence is a plot hole. This is confusing to me since there was never a second coffin. The manga and anime both show a secret compartment in the coffin.
Oh, wow! The manga gets so much more detail, and I know when I watch the animated version, I'm gonna get less detail.
Show a secret compartment in the coffin.
The whole time he was just laying under the coffin
before the ship exploded. At the end of part 1, Erina is seen sitting in the red-lined portion of the coffin. In part 3, we can see that portion is removable and there is space underneath. The amount of people that do not even know about this is staggering, so I'd like to make sure that as many people as possible are at least aware of it. The existence of this secret compartment also makes perfect sense. If Dio ever had to hide inside, he would need a way to protect himself just in case it is opened in direct sunlight. However, even after knowing, there are still some people that will try to argue about how Dio managed to get inside. Some explanations have been given in a couple of different JoJo novels, but those are non-canon, so I will not be using those. Really, I'd say the answer is as simple as he took Jonathan's body and just walked over and got inside. But people seem more particular about details, so I'll go over those.
Part of me wishes I would have saw exactly how he did that. How did you do that, Mr. Dio? Oh, fabulous Dio. He's a cool, badass dude. I just don't like him.
People seem more particular about details, so I'll
sense.
Go over those.
Or a bad guy.
He's how Dio got inside the compartment when Erina was already there, or how she didn't notice. Considering that it's a secret compartment, there's probably a secretive way to open it. If Dio had customized a coffin that can shoot out a crystal from the inside to kill people, I'm sure that he would have had a way to open the coffin straight into the bottom portion, either from the lid itself or through a false bottom. As for how Erina wouldn't notice the movement of the coffin, I think the swaying of the
she
boat
get-
along with explosions and falling debris would account for that. Others have asked how Erina left the coffin without Dio escaping. This one is also quite simple. At the end of part 1, Erina was floating in the open coffin and was rescued off the coast of the Canary Islands. I'd say it's reasonable to suggest that in a time period with no electricity, Erina is most likely to have been rescued during the daytime, during which Dio would not be able to go outside of the coffin.
True.
There was no reason that Erina would take
So
the
the
coffin
coffin
with her,
sinks?
so it eventually sank to the seabed where it was found 100 years later. This time, the coffin was opened after the sun had set, so Dio was able to escape.
Talk about timing, right?
Jotaro got all of the objects in his cell. While keeping himself in the jail cell, Star Platinum acted subconsciously and brought Jotaro objects. Some people point out that Star Platinum is a short-range power-type stand, and shouldn't be able to go very far to gather these objects. I'd like to point out that a stand's effective range is not necessarily equal to its actual range. Close-range stands generally decrease in power as they get farther from their user, but it's not out of the question that Star Platinum would have been able to gather objects from in and possibly around the police station. As for how the larger objects were able to get inside, we're able to clearly see that Star Platinum can open the cell door on its own. A more difficult thing to address is the first battle against Magician's Red. Star Platinum loses power while Jotaro is being suffocated by the Red Bind. Later on in the Dark Blue Moon fight, which takes place largely underwater, breath seems to have no effect on stands. I can easily see this as a holdover from early concepts for stands, which in Japanese can be read as ghostly ripple. However, on the next page, Joseph still says that stands are created by life energy, which is how they are generally thought of in later parts. Stands are tied to
My
your
first time
consciousness,
seeing
and
a
losing
stand.
consciousness would make your stand weaken. Jotaro was in his first stand battle and was being strangled. While in the Dark Blue Moon fight, Jotaro is prepared and is holding his breath for no more than 2 minutes. Some people ask how Joseph can look as old as he does despite being a Hamon user. In part 2, Lisa looked quite young, so why isn't Joseph the same way? Lisa was raised by Straizo and had been learning Hamon since childhood. After the death of her husband, she secluded herself and did nothing but train in the following years. Joseph, on the other hand, only trained in Hamon because he had to, and had no reason to continue doing so after the defeat of the Pillar
phrase
Men.
I hate.
Lisa is actually not a very good example to make this argument. Joseph is 69 years old in part 3, while Lisa was 50 in part 2. A better example would be Straizo, who at 75 years old and even with constant Hamon training, still began to look older as the years went on.
Shit, that's old. Let me look that old.
Dio was shown to have created chimera creatures that he kept around his mansion. Some people ask why he never made more of these after he returned. The first answer is that he simply didn't like them, and only really made them to test the limit of his abilities. However, what I think people are missing is that Dio essentially did use this ability again when he grafted his own head onto Jonathan's body. During the first appearance of Kakyoin, he is seen using a painting while he attacks Jotaro.
Only once.
Over Jotaro's leg, and Jotaro is attacked in the same spot. Many people ask why he never used this painting ability again. This is another one that confuses me. The painting was never a part of his ability, it was just an attack from Hierophant Green. Either an Emerald Splash or an attack from one of Hierophant Green's strands. Kakyoin even destroys the painting afterwards, hinting that it has nothing to do with his ability. Some people have said that since we
It was just a cool scene to me, so.
from his stand. Well, we don't see his stand when he destroys the painting, and many times in the series we've been shown things happening with the stand being invisible. Later on, Kakyoin possesses the school nurse by using Hierophant Green to control her. He is using a puppet in this scene, but the ability is shown to be unrelated. This further supports that the canvas itself is unrelated to his stand. Both the canvas and the puppet are just being used for show. However, Kakyoin's possession abilities are tied to another common question. Outside of this scene, Kakyoin no longer uses his stand to possess people.
Yeah, could you do that to
There are
Dio?
multiple reasons for this. Kakyoin was being manipulated by Dio, and would never harm innocent people on his own. He does still use Hierophant Green to enter people, as seen at the end of the Death 13 fight, and when he saves a little girl from being attacked by lovers. None of Kakyoin's other fights would benefit in any way from using possession. First of all, stand users can see his stand, which would make them very difficult to possess. Tower of Grey was too small and fast, so once he caught it, he tore it apart instead. Whole Horse and J-Guile were too far away, and he wanted to let Polnareff be the one to kill J-Guile anyway. Possessing Steely Dan himself would solve nothing about the stand in Joseph's brain, and it would just harm Joseph if he attempted it. The younger Darby would be able to see himself being attacked by Hierophant Green, which would count as cheating and cause Kakyoin to instantly have his soul taken. And lastly, Dio, where the entire premise of the fight was that Kakyoin needed to stay a safe distance away from him. One which I find somewhat annoying is the often repeated line, "No one can just deflect the Emerald Splash." Like a lot of Araki Forgot moments, this one started as a joke, but for whatever reason I've seen it lumped in with other inconsistencies as if this is somehow one of them. This is really no different from any other villain character being surprised that their attack doesn't work. This line is also from the dub, which makes
Oh god, that was beautiful. This one was just beautiful.
1 and 2, the battles focused mostly on Hamon abilities, but starting in Part 3, there was a shift towards stands. Some people wonder why a change like this was made, and why Joseph didn't teach Hamon to the other characters. It has been shown that Hamon takes weeks of training to use effectively. The group had 50 days until Holly died, and they ended up killing Dio on the last possible day. It is simply not efficient to stop and try to learn Hamon, or to teach it half-assed.
I love the stand, so I'm not complaining.
In Part 3 is that the forced awakening of a stand in Holly has caused her to become ill, since she is not strong enough to control it. Some people have asked how Holly is not able to control her stand, when children, infants, dogs, rats, and other peaceful people like Tonio or Aya can. I think this stems from a misunderstanding about how stands work. A stand is not necessarily based on a fighting spirit, and more like a strength of spirit. First of all, people like Tonio and Aya manifested their stands through mastery of a craft. Since they became so skilled in a certain task, a stand formed which fit their skill. This is different from a forced awakening through something like the Arrow or the Joestar Curse. The Joestar stands were awakened because of the distress signal sent from Jonathan's body. This gave them very powerful stands capable of locating and finding Dio. Since Holly is a peaceful person, she is not suited for this kind of stand.
Yeah, they kind of explained that.
So not the only person shown in Jojo who had a partial stand awakening, as the user of Cheap Trick in Part 4 was still able to attain a stand but was unable to control it. Early on in Part 3, stand names were based on tarot cards. Before leaving, the group draws the cards to choose the name of their stand. Enya also used the cards to name the stands of Dio's minions. So why didn't they ever draw the same cards? In a series where fate has repeatedly been shown to be real, and where fortune tellers make multiple appearances in which they are always accurate, I really don't see how people get hung up on this. They didn't draw the same cards because they're tarot cards, and it was fated to happen that way. It's really that simple. Right after the group leaves for Egypt, Dio is shown using his own version of Hermit Purple to spy on them. A lot of people seem to think this is an abandoned idea where Dio would have had the power of every stand. That is nothing but a fan theory and has no source whatsoever, and the amount of times that I've seen it repeated as fact is insane. In actuality, this Hermit Purple is the stand of Jonathan's body, as confirmed by Araki himself in the stand dictionary from the Jojo Agogo art book.
Jojo Agogo?
To this stand as the Passion, but this is incorrect.
There's so much I need to know.
Jonathan's stand in the non-canon spin-off novel George Joestar, and in the book, it functions completely differently from this stand. The official name for this stand is simply
George
Stand. To talk more about this stand, some people have asked why Dio was able to track the movements of the group so easily, and this is the reason. This is also the reason Dio was able to manipulate the message Joseph read on the TV. The characters Kakyoin and Polnareff were both being shown controlled by flesh buds placed by Dio. They became allies after Jotaro removed their flesh buds. Some people have asked why Jotaro didn't recruit any more people using this method. Many stand users were shown to be following Dio for reasons other than mind control. Many of them were seduced by him, which Dio has an extreme tendency for, and others talk openly about being paid by him. Most of them are just plain evil, and there are even people like Whole Horse who is clearly not being mind controlled since he often considers betraying Dio. None of the other stand users were
You should have did it, Whole Horse. Well, you couldn't. Never mind.
In the flashback introducing Jay Guile, he is briefly shown using a shield that protects himself from the rain. I'm surprised people still bring this up since I really haven't seen anyone talking about it since before the Part 3 anime aired. This is really as simple as having Hanged Man go between reflections on the raindrops to prevent them from hitting him. During the Dark Blue Moon fight, the runaway girl character, later known in the anime as Anne, is introduced. She stays with the group for a short time and rejoins them again before later being sent home. The argument for whether Araki forgot her is really the same as Poco in the last video.
Gone.
She's just a minor character. In the Dark Blue Moon and Strength fights, Jotaro is shown using his Star Finger ability, where he extends his finger to hit things. A lot of people have asked why this ability is not used in more situations.
Why would it be
even
used
bring up
again?
examples from other parts. I'll cover the examples for other parts in those videos when I get to them. However, there is some word from Araki as to why this ability didn't return. He said, as the fights intensified, its frequency of use decreased. This would imply, at least to me, that the ability is not very powerful in the first place. Jotaro has only ever used it as a last resort when he is restrained. However, I will be revisiting the viability of Starfinger in my Part 4 and Part 6 videos. As for within Part 3, the idea that random abilities not constantly coming back means that Araki forgot them is just asinine to me. During the fight against Ebony Devil, Polnareff is blinded and trapped underneath the bed, making him unable to see where to attack with his stand. However, Polnareff is seemingly able to see with his stand inside Joseph during the lovers' fight. What some people seem to have forgotten is that Joseph was showing Kakyoin and Polnareff what was happening on the TV with Hermit Purple. When Rubber Soul is disguised as Kakyoin, he is shown using Hierophant Green to attack the robber. For some reason, people view this as a plot hole, despite Yellow Temperance being a blob that can shapeshift into anything he wants. Others ask how nobody saw this attack happening, since Yellow Temperance is a visible stand, but the fake Hierophant Green is shown traveling low along the ground while the others have their back turned. During the fight against Steely Dan, Kakyoin and Polnareff are shown shrinking their stands to go inside of Joseph's body. Shrinking your stand takes intense concentration to do, and leaves you completely defenseless. Your stand's power also decreases the smaller it becomes. A lot of people seem to think this would have been useful again.
I don't get this, like, the questions or the things he forgot.
Against Darby, Joseph enters a bet that involves dropping coins into a glass, trying not to be the one to make it spill over.
I love that one.
I've seen multiple people asking why he didn't use Hamon to keep the liquid inside the glass. This has a very easy answer. Everyone, including non-Hamon users, can see Hamon. This can be seen even all the way back with Smokey in Part 2, who describes Joseph glowing. Darby would see this happening and instantly know Joseph was cheating, which would result in his soul being taken. Because of this, Joseph used a more discreet cheating method. Iggy Stan the Fool uses a sand replica of Dio to fool Vanilla Ice. There are a couple different questions surrounding this. The first is how Iggy would know what Dio looks like. When the group's entire goal is locating and defeating Dio and they carry a picture of him around, I don't see why they wouldn't have shown Iggy this picture to let him know that once Dio is defeated, they would let him go home.
I just never thought this deep.
This was replicated. People seem to forget that Polnareff is there as well, and that he has met and heard Dio before. Silver Chariot is shown to have an ability to remove his armor at the cost of defense to increase his speed. As with other stand abilities, people ask why the use of these decreased. Most people seem to mention the Vanilla Ice fight, despite speed not really being an issue here. Chariot doesn't have issue dodging the attacks, it only becomes an issue whenever he is unable to see the attack at all. Such as when he lost part of his leg, which was after the sand he had thrown to track his movement had gone away. Dio makes his return in Part 3, now with the time-stopping abilities of the world. However, he is no longer seen using some of his vampiric abilities like freezing and space for Stingy Eyes. Dio makes it very clear that Jonathan's body is rejecting him and limiting his vampiric abilities. Even if he does have access to these abilities, he has little opportunity to use them. Freezing only works on direct contact, and would not work through stands since there is no moisture. And considering that Dio's main goal is to get more Joestar blood to strengthen his time stop, I think that the last thing he'd want to do is expel his bodily fluids in a last-ditch move like Space Ripper Stingy Eyes. Lastly, Dio has become so confident in the world and improving its time stop that he would have little care for those other abilities.
True. I know I wouldn't give a damn about him.
Now possibly one of the most controversial topics in JoJo, Star Platinum stopping time. As with the coffin, the biggest Araki forgots seem to have the easiest answers. Jotaro was gifted a stand capable of defeating Dio from the Joestar curse. Not entirely dissimilar to how Jonathan's body and Joseph were given similar stands. The explanation for why Jotaro had to develop his time stop is the same with Dio's Hermit Purple. Dio has had a year to strengthen it, while Jotaro is just starting to learn it and is finally pushed hard enough to use it outright during the final battle. Jotaro tested whether or not he could move within time stop using the magnet trick. Since the magnet was connected to Dio, it was not stopped in time, similar to anything else Dio holds. Because of this, it would attract Jotaro's magnet, and if he is able to feel this, he would know that he is capable of moving within stop time. Star Platinum's ability is super speed and reflexes, and what is the peak of those abilities if not moving so fast that it's like you stop time? Some also seem to imply that this ability wasn't planned and came out of nowhere, when it has been documented that the World and Star Platinum were the first two stands Araki created when planning Part 3. The final thing I'll be covering is Joseph's revival. This will play into another moment in the next video, so I won't go into too much detail. Joseph's body was clinically dead after the fight with Dio. By doing a blood transfusion with Dio's body and jump-starting the heart, Jotaro was able to resuscitate him.
Okay, I want to know this one though.
From Dio's body, shouldn't he become a vampire? Vanilla Ice was revived with Dio's blood and became one. Why is Joseph any different? Well, a lot of the blood Joseph got back was really just his own blood, that Dio had taken only 4 minutes earlier. Even if Joseph was to get some of Dio's blood inside of him, that would be little trouble for a Hamon user. Jonathan was shown to be able to expel vampiric essence from his body. Eliminating Dio's cells from within his own blood would be as simple as channeling a bit of Hamon. This is supported by Straizo, whose vampire cells were destroyed by his own Hamon. Second, some people question whether Joseph should be able to be revived to begin with. What people seem to miss is how little time he really spent without blood, which was 4 minutes. Even in real life, people have been revived from apparent death after longer periods than that. Others also bring up that Joseph's soul left his body. A detail a lot of people overlook is Jotaro questioning if he's seeing things in that scene, but I'll ignore that. People have gotten very caught up in the specifics behind souls leaving bodies and when someone is really considered dead in Jojo. At the end of the day, like most things in Jojo, it comes down to fate. Joseph Joestar is a character shown to have a supernatural tendency for cheating death, and this is no different.
That's true. Oh, that is true. I've been wanting to talk so much to do this, but I was like, okay, let me just sit and listen. But what all this boils down to in my brain is like, I just kind of chalk it up to that's just part of the story. Why was that character involved not brought up again? Because they were just part of a plot, part of the story. It is interesting how deep people have gotten with this. I would never have gotten that deep. This is fascinating shit. Wow, the questions. This doesn't change my point of view on the show. I still love the anime. Western, we got totally different time now in part 7. We in Western time, which I despise Western movies. I don't like Western time. Indiana Cowboys, never was a fan, but damn, if he isn't making me like some damn Western right now with that part 7. Blaze Squad, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you blaze up the like button, and I will see you guys in the next video.